Richard, when you think about your career and your life and you look back, what's the thing you're most proud of?
Wow. Um, so I did 25 years as a lawyer. So started life, went to law school, did law at university, got a job in a law firm, trained as a solicitor, qualified. Did a bit of time in private practice, went into working for in commerce and industry. So I was an in-house lawyer for most of that 25 years, and did some really great jobs. Last few years of doing that, I actually was doing interim work. So I'd worked something really important out about myself that I really liked, either kind of like fixing um, broken legal functions or setting them up. And so I kind of did that on an interim basis. So I would go and work in places for sort of 6 to 12 months, whatever. And so that's what I've done. I've recently done a career pivot. But the thing, I now do coaching and leadership development, and the thing I've actually learned about myself probably in the last year of doing that, I think the thing that I feel most proud of when I'm talking to kind of people who are sort of at the beginning of their leadership journeys, and we're talking about kind of the difference you can make. I don't look back and think there's any particular legal achievement that I'm super proud of. Not to say that I'm not proud of them. I did some really interesting jobs and roles and worked in some fascinating companies. Um, but the thing I've absolutely been most proud of here in 2025, when I look back over that 25 years, is that I was able to be an out proud gay man throughout my legal career. Certainly after the first couple of years of it, I was quite scared to come out of the closet to begin with, but came out of the closet pretty early on, late 90s, I suppose, and was always out. And the reason I'm proud of that is because um, I've really, when I look back, I kind of just really proud that I was kind of open and able to kind of almost be a bit of a role model where I didn't have any. So when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, there weren't very many out gay people. So I was able to be in kind of senior leadership roles in a sensible job, living in nice communities, and just be sort of out and proud, if you like. And I think that is the thing that I am probably most proud of in my career. Weirdly,
But it is inspirational because if I think back to that time period, where we were thinking the 80s, 90s, you said,
yeah, I was born in 1976, so I grew up in the kind of Thatcher years. I was at school in the Thatcher years, all through the AIDS crisis when I was growing up in kind of provincial northwest England, with, I'm going to say, small c conservative parents and also probably capital C conservative parents too. So yeah, growing up in that kind of environment, and then yeah, in the 90s. So I went to university in the mid 90s, and I started my legal career towards the end of the 1990s.
so if I think about what was going on at the time, I would say there was a lot of negative press. We're talking 20 to 30 years ago, and it's hard for me to remember fully everything that was going on. However, I actually interviewed a friend of mine called Matt Garvey, and he was talking about like a lot of the narrative in the press
That's
towards
right.
gay men,
Yeah,
mad, bad, and sad, is
yeah,
things that he had to contend with.
yeah.
And I can understand why mentally that kind of narrative not being accepted is really challenging at that point. How did you navigate such a it seems almost draconian to think about that perception back then and the media and that narrative. Like, how did you navigate that?
Yeah. Um, it is quite mad to be sitting here in 2025 and to sort of think that like this was ever really a big deal, and that we're sort of still talking about it. And um, it's quite interesting if you go online and you look for when uh, EastEnders was around. Sort of, I think EastEnders launched in the 80s, and it was either towards the end of the 80s or the early 90s. There was a gay character. I think he was called Colin, and um, he had a partner living in the house with him, and he kissed his partner on the forehead. So his partner was sitting in the chair, and Colin was going out to work, and he reached down and kissed him on the forehead, and he went out to work. And that was, I think it was probably the late 80s. You can still go online now, and you can see like the headlines in the red top newspapers, like the Sun and things like that. And the outrage that kiss on the forehead caused, it's quite hard to imagine now, but I would encourage you to go and have a look at it. Um, the outrage that caused, the language that was used on the front page of a British national newspaper about the fact that two guys were in a relationship together, the negativity around it was pretty horrific, actually. And so that encapsulates for me brilliantly like what the kind of social thinking was at the time. So I grew up in fear. So as a kid, um, I went through all the kind of usual sort of growth patterns. I knew once I kind of hit teenage years in particular, I knew that I was interested in guys and not girls, but I went through the motions because I wanted to prove to myself that I definitely wasn't into girls. I lost my virginity to a girl who was my best friend. She's no longer with us, unfortunately. She passed away at the age of 40 of a brain tumor, but she and I stayed best friends. I lost my virginity to her, and it was actually going through that act that made me realise that wasn't for me, and that it was definitely guys for me. I was terrified. So I'm about 16, 17 at this point, early 90s, 92, 93. So I'm kind of learning to drive. I'm absolutely terrified because all of the language, everything that's been sort of said to me in my kind of provincial, small C conservative, big C conservative upbringing, the Margaret Thatcher years, was that it's wrong to be gay. It's not okay to be gay. It's bad to be gay. And in my head, I remember thinking, "Oh fuck, I'm the only person that feels like this. There's something wrong with me. There's something broken." And I went through that as a teenager, and I was scared. I was really, really scared because I thought I don't really want to hide this part of me, but maybe I ought to hide this part of me. And it was obviously it's going through the act of losing my virginity, and then I went off to university, and I was able to kind of go and explore um, life as a gay man. And I remember going to Students' Union. They had a lesbian, gay, bisexual group, and I went to meet like-minded people, and started to make friends. And we went out clubbing, and I don't know if it's still the same now, but like even just to go to a gay bar in the 1990s was like going underground. It was like a thing to be like ashamed of, to be, you were in hiding almost, but you could go and explore that part of you, but you had to kind of do it where no one else could see. It was quite a sort of quite a shameful sort of existence. And at the age of kind of 18, 19, I was absolutely convinced from all the things that had been said to me by my family, I suppose, and just generally what was going on in society, and that kind of EastEnders storyline in the newspaper is a good example of kind of how negative things were. I was absolutely convinced that if I came out as a gay man, that everybody would disown me, that I would lose all of my family, and I would lose all my friends. And quick spoiler, that didn't happen. And I started to come out once I was at my first year of university. So I started to come out. I came out to my friend who I'd lost my virginity to. It was a very beautiful moment. I'd been to visit her. She was at a different university to me. We'd stayed really good friends. And I sat on the bed with her. We were getting ready to go for a night out. I said, "There's something I really need to tell you." And she said, "You're either going to tell me that you're gay or you've got somebody pregnant." And I went, "Yeah, it's the first one." And she went, "Richard, I literally couldn't give a shit. I just want you to be happy, and I want you to be cool with who you are." And it was a really kind of breakthrough moment for me. And from there, it gave me the confidence to go on. And I told my sister, and my sister had exactly the same reaction as my ex-girlfriend. And my sister was upset because she said, "I'm not sure how mum and dad are going to feel about it." And I worry about that. But other than that, just be yourself, kid, just get on. So I had this great support. I told my grandma, who was in her late 70s. She was amazing about it. She couldn't have cared less either. She had like 20 odd grandchildren, so she didn't mind having a gay one. And it weirdly, you went into the kind of mid-90s where it almost became a bit kind of like trendy to be gay, because it was kind of like, it went from being this kind of underground thing to people like, "Oh, we've got a gay friend," or we've got a gay person in the family. And it was sort of started to be talked about a little bit. So that's what did it for me was having the confidence to do it. And even when I did face some negative reactions from my parents, I pushed through. I pushed through, and I didn't sort of listen to some of the things that they said. They were fearful for me. They were fearful because they'd grown up in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, and they didn't see any positive role models for gay people, and they therefore were worried what would happen to me as a gay adult. And that was the kind of weird shift transition that was happening in the 1990s, basically.
Let's talk about your parents and how you approached that conversation, because it sounds like you went to a few people first,
Mm.
people you wanted to confide in first, and then how did you approach the conversation with your parents? And it sounds like their response was concern for you.
Yeah. So my parents were divorced, and unfortunately, I didn't ever get to have the conversation with my dad because he died when I was 19, very unexpectedly. And I didn't come out to my mum, but she met my partner, who I'm still with now. We're 30 years together this year, and I'd introduced him. I brought him home in the summer holidays to sort of spend time together and to sort of meet my family. But he was there as a friend from university. And after he'd left, my mum confronted me in the kitchen, and she blew the whistle on me, basically. And she said, "I think you're in a relationship with that boy." And I was like, "Oh fuck, I better just be honest." So I said, "Yes, I am." So I can't sit here and say I was brave enough to come out to my parents. And I've got a really good relationship with my mum now. She's in her late 70s. I've had a really good relationship with my mum ever since, but she didn't react brilliantly, and she said some very negative things, and she put some very negative thoughts into my head, which have stayed with me for a few decades actually since then, about all of the fears that she had about what she saw being gay meant. And again, my parents didn't have any experience of knowing any gay people. Gay people were typically kind of ridiculed, or they were figures of fun. You know, you had like your Larry Grace, and they were sort of quite extreme, kind of sort of caricature gay people now. But at the time, that was all you would see. You would see people sort of like hosting shows, but they'd be like really caricature kind of extreme versions and quite flamboyant. So my mum just had all these images, and she just said, Your legal career won't be a success." You know, she was a bit anti-men at the time. She said, all men are bastards. So you don't want to be in a relationship with a man. Lots of general statements like that, but there was a lot of kind of. She basically gave a lot of her fear and put it down, and just went, "This is going to be a problem if you're going to be gay, and hopefully it's a phase and you can kind of get over it." Was the sort of gist of it. And I'm like 19 at this point, and I just received that and planted it away in here slightly. And then I think I spent the next 20 years trying to prove her wrong on everything that she said to me.
I suppose at that stage, because everybody else had been supportive up until that point,
Yeah.
and that was probably the answer you were looking for. And she came back to you with an answer which was, this is going to be a problem for you. And also, I think I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if someone came out now, I don't think that you're going to get that negative reaction in today's world. So I think it was definitely a sign of the times.
I would disagree with you on that.
Oh, really?
I think the
Okay.
chances of it happening are a lot less than it would have been in the
Okay.
80s, 90s. It just definitely does still happen. So there are still families out there. There are people with religious beliefs who don't believe it's okay and don't believe it's right. And maybe like we don't move in amongst them, like socially, but those people are definitely still out there. So there are still people who were 19, 20, got their whole lives ahead of them, who are still fearful of being open. But I think that number has diminished quite significantly to 20, 30 years ago.
Got you. Understood. Okay, I understand. So those comments. So let's think about. I'm just interested to see how you then reconciled, because it's almost like you kind of had to say, right, I am who I am,
Yeah.
and I'm going to persevere because this is who I am. Was there an in a turmoil, in a battle? How did you've got some people that have been very supportive, your mum's not being supportive. How do you reconcile that in your mind?
Mm.
You said you battled with it over a couple of decades. It takes time.
Yeah. I definitely when I look back, set off on a trajectory into adulthood, right? So I'd been sent to um, a really good school. I'd gone to university, got a law degree, got a job in a law firm. I set off on this trajectory. I was given this platform by my parents. They invested in me. They and I think a lot of parents probably do this with their kids. They had a kind of vision as how they wanted their kids to turn out, and I wanted to make them proud of me, I suppose. And I guess the point here is I wanted them to be proud of me in spite of like my sexuality. So I wanted to just go out and use the platform that they'd given me and sort of achieve loads of really great stuff, but also to be happy and to be. It was really important that I was true to myself. So there wasn't an inner turmoil. I didn't spend 20 years in an inner turmoil, sort of wrestling with anything to do with my sexuality. The thing that I probably wrestled with and ended up feeling like when I look back with the benefit of hindsight, I did probably spend 20 years trying to prove to my mum that all those things that she basically went, here's all my fears, I'm going to put them on the table here and tell you why I think your life's going to be difficult because you're going to live a life as an open gay man. I basically thought I'm going to take all those, mum. I'm going to prove them wrong to you. And I think subconsciously I went through the next 20 years trying to do that. To go, look, I can show you. I can have a good career. I can have an interesting job. I can be well thought of in the community. I can live with my same-sex partner. I can have a nice house. I can have a nice car. I can do all these things, um, and still be me and be happy and not have to hide any of that shit. Um, and so I think I did that, and I had there was a kind of watershed moment when I hit 40 where I realised that actually I needed to stop trying to prove things to other people, and just get on with the business of being happy anyway, not worry too much about what other people thought.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you kind of rebel against parents if they put up something or say something which isn't in line with who you are. You have a couple of choices there. You either agree or you in some respects you rebel, and it sounds like you almost took it upon yourself to say I'm going to show you, and
Yeah,
that's maybe where your strength, maybe your motivation came from.
yeah. I'm sad I never got to talk to my dad about it because my dad was a Northern Irish Protestant and had some quite strong views about things, but he was ultimately a really loving character. And I'm kind of sad I never got to have an adult relationship with him because there was always kind of a parent and child thing going on. And I think my dad's reaction would have been less negative than my mum's.
Really.
Yeah, yeah. I think my dad was. Whereas my mum kind of just went, here's all my negative stuff, and I'm going to put it there, and I'm there. You do something with that. My dad's was a much bigger picture. That life is short, more sort of positive kind of outlook on life. I think is probably the best way to describe him. And I think we would have just had a grown up conversation about it, and he would have. I'm confident he would have been okay about it. Not like straight away in the moment, but I think he'd have got there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure my mum ever got there.
Where's she been in recent years?
She, I've just kind of let her. If she's got a problem with that, I just kind of that's her problem. I've realised it's nothing for me to. I don't have anything to prove anymore. I don't think she does have a problem. She tells me that she's very proud of me. She says very affirmative things to me these days. I just realised I needed to stop trying to sort of prove anything or like win her affection because ultimately, even though I think I had the courage of my convictions when I was 18, 19, that there was nothing wrong or broken with me, I think I still felt like I probably needed to prove that for the next 20 years. It's probably what happened.
But do you think that's also an age thing as well? We chatted earlier, because when you get to a certain point in your life, you do stop worrying so much. I think 40 is a good turning point for that. You stop worrying quite so much what other people think.
Mm.
Do you think that's got just time, age, wisdom, being accepting yourself?
100%, 100%. There's this thing that happens. I think if those of us who are fortunate enough to sort of put our heads above the parapet and not just kind of, walk with our heads down and just sort of follow our feet one step at a time and kind of look out into the world and like become aware of who we are and what's important and what matters to us. There's this kind of natural thing that happens, I think, to human beings where you start to um, understand what's more important. And certainly for me, 40 was a big turning point. I remember just this really strong sense of being on this trajectory, being in this channel, kind of being on the hamster wheel a little bit. The trajectory was sort of going upwards. I was always trying to achieve more, have more, do more, be more successful, have more status, have more stuff. And I definitely got to about 40 and I just went, I think I've got enough. I don't think I need any more. And that was a real moment of, why am I striving for a more expensive car or a fancier holiday or a bigger house that will be harder to maintain and all that sort of stuff? And I just started to examine all of that, and it was definitely about 40.
There's a big life shift that happens at around 40, which we're going to come back to in a second. I'd just like to, while we've been talking about it, because it feels like on your journey of coming out, you've shared it with your friends, your family. Can you talk me through what that was like in your professional career?
Yeah, so when I started as a trainee solicitor back in the late 1990s, I was in a big London law firm. It was a great job, really good firm. And my mum's words were ringing in my head, and it's like, don't come out because it will go against you. People will hold you back in your career. And I was probably 12 months into my job, and I realised that was not necessarily the case anymore. To be fair, 10 years earlier, I think it probably would have been wise not to be too open about private life and sexuality, etc. But I was able to be open pretty early on in my career about the fact that I was in a same-sex relationship. And then what I found is, and I when I said to you before, like it's almost became slightly trendy to be gay in the 90s. People started to sort of care a bit less about it. Um, Tony Blair came in 1997. The whole kind of British society shifted, um, and I feel like I've been a very, very lucky generation who's managed to ride the sort of crest of a wave of kind of acceptability of being gay in society, that if I had been born 10 years earlier, I don't think I would have experienced, and I probably would have lived with a lot more of that fear, and it would have had much more of a negative impact on my day-to-day life and my working life. So, excuse me. So I was able to be what you would call out and proud, and I basically set about trying to normalize the presence of gay people in society. That was my sort of challenge to myself. And I hate the word normal, because there's always this connotation, when especially when you grow up gay, that you're not normal and that there's something wrong with you. But if I just put that to one side for a minute, for me, normalizing two guys living together in the same house in your street, being the guy down the corridor in an office, that's Richard. He's in a relationship with another guy, and he's really open about it. Um, where we lived in Wales fairly recently, it was a smallish village, interacting in the village and just being very kind of just present as an openly gay man, without waving a flag or banging a drum about it, but just kind of being there and being out and open and present about it, just kind of normalizes things. It just sort of starts to make everything go like this. And I don't want to be normal, right? I don't know what that is, but I don't want to be normal. But so that's not what I'm saying. But I wanted to be part of that push to normalize the fact that there's just two guys living together, or two girls living together, and maybe they've got a kid or whatever. Just that nobody kind of looks at it. It's just I kind of feel like how you love is more important than who you love. And so at work, I was just always open about it. And for me, being open about it again was not about waving a flag or banging a drum. I was never that brave. I did never had that much courage. So I did my kind of pushing the envelope much more stealthily. But for me, it would be things like I would just make it known in a conversation, like in a water cooler moment, or when you're chatting to colleagues, that uh, when people inevitably get on to talk about family life and things like that, I would talk about my partner. And then in the next sentence, I would make sure I got the word he into that sentence. So I would say, oh, yeah, I'm doing this with my partner at the weekend and he's blah, blah, blah. So that there was absolutely no room for that awkward moment where someone went, oh, what does your wife do? Because that probably happened to me early on, and I just went, I need to kind of stop this from happening because it's really bloody awkward when people go, oh, what does your wife do? Because it was kind of, what does your girlfriend do? It was just kind of, that was the normal thing, right? And so I just wanted to just sort of go, I have a partner and he's a guy. Let's just move the conversation on. And that's kind of just how it evolved for me. And then I worked into more and more senior roles at work. I worked in organizations of all shapes and sizes. And then, kind of diversity and inclusion became a thing not all that long ago. And people were celebrating stuff that wasn't normal kind of sort of plain vanilla stuff. So diversity and inclusion covers a whole host of different things across a whole host of different spectrums. And my part of that spectrum was being gay. So that also, I found those initiatives quite helpful because it's just gives people the opportunity to talk about stuff and to get it out in the open, and to because people do still find it difficult to do. I think I know sometimes it looks easy, but it's not. And for some people, they find it hard to be open and out because they do carry fear and shame.
If you were to provide some advice or offer some advice, you've been through this. There'll be people watching. Maybe they're thinking about coming out. Maybe they have come out. Maybe they've told their family. Maybe they're thinking about how they need to be in the workplace. Any guidance you can offer? I think your story is courageous and it is brave, although it almost shouldn't be.
Yeah,
That's the interesting
yeah,
thing about it. It should be. What I love what you've done is just that you were almost proactive in just dropping into conversation. So it wasn't a thing. It was just like you were open, not being flamboyant in any way, but just dropping it into the conversation. So it was just known, and then you could move on. And I think that's a great way of doing it. It's very subtle, and also a great way of communicating. But what would be your kind of guide?
it's going to be different for everybody because everyone's circumstances are different. So I would say, trust your instinct, and so don't just go, oh fuck it, I'm just gonna write it all on a big wall and just I'm just get everybody, just you've got to trust your instinct on what is right for you in your circumstances. So I'm really pleased when I look back about the way I did it and the judgments that I made, and even though there were some difficult conversations, that I kind of absorbed them and didn't let them detract me from what I wanted to do. So for me, my goal was to be able to be happy as an adult and to be true to myself and to be happy. So that for me meant being out and open. It might not be the same for other people. It might not be possible for some people. I love my family. I love my friends. I'm very friends and family orientated. I've always been I've worked hard over the years, but I've always work to live rather than live to work. So, especially losing my dad at an early age, sort of just taught me life is too short. So, even though I did some sort of semi-hardcore jobs over the years, um, I was never really that motivated by the big salaries and the career trajectory. It was always, for me, was about being happy as a human being. So that was why it was important for me to do the things I did. It'd be different for everybody, but trust your instinct and be true to yourself, because it's really important to be happy and not to feel there's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to be sad about if it's a sexuality thing. It's 2025. If some people do have a problem with it, then it's their problem. But it's different for everybody in terms of what they're willing to sacrifice. So I think for some people, it feels weird actually to be talking about it. For some people, they do still have to make these decisions about whether to come out or not, because for some people, there is too much to lose if they get ostracized from their community or their families, for example.
It's a lot to consider, isn't it? It's a lot to think about. It's almost unfair.
It is. Look, life is short. Life is short. Life is unpredictable. Everybody has a different view. Everybody sees things through a different lens. So you've just got to be true to yourself. I think we're getting much better as a society at accepting that everybody is different, and I think we're getting better at starting to look through that different lens. I sense society is just becoming more adept at kind of going, not everybody thinks the same way I do. That's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important for people to be themselves. But one of the words that you said there is community. It's going to be really different based on the community that you have around you, and I think that's the really challenging part, isn't it? Because some communities might be far more understanding and other
Yeah.
communities might not be understanding. And I know when I spoke to Matt before, what he was saying was just that my community was not going to be understanding. And so his thinking, his expectation was that I'm going to have to create a brand new life, which obviously for him was totally terrifying.
Yeah.
And I can imagine some people might think that.
It's that fear again. It's that fear of what you might lose by being true to yourself. And so wrapped up in all of that fear and what you might lose is this kind of sense of shame and guilt. And so the whole reason why we kind of call it pride, being out and proud, pride is the opposite of shame. And there's this sense that, if you allow it to be one of those things that kind of drives you under, that makes you feel fearful and like you want to hide, it's a shame thing. And so pride is the opposite of that. And so that's why, when I look back now, and when I'm talking to the folks on the leadership courses that I work on, I'm like, I kind of feel like I'm really proud of the fact that when I was a teenager, I never ever thought I was going to be able to be out and open, or actually necessarily in a loving relationship with the same sex person, and to be able to have a good career, and do all of those things, because there were no role models then. And so I realized, and I think this is why I feel proud about it, is because I feel like in some small way I have been a role model. I didn't set out to be a role model, but when I look back, and I think I have been a role model. So I have done some really interesting and cool legal stuff, right? But it's just like doesn't really mean that much to me. But I've been a role model, and will continue to be a role model, I hope. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way, just by being out and open. But look, I'm outgoing. I'm quite confident. I'm quite gregarious. So this stuff sort of comes naturally to me. It's not the same for everybody else. So I can't just sit here and go, "Hey, everybody, just be like me," because these are just sort of some of my natural qualities that bring this out of me, I suppose.
If someone's a bit more introverted, is there anything, and they're thinking about coming out? Is there a I suppose you're going to say, I'm trying to give someone some guidance on maybe the way of doing it, because I feel like the world is a better place when everyone is their true authentic self, when everyone can get to show up to be who they are, whether it's at home, in the workplace, just as them as a character, as a person. I feel like that's when the world's a better place. So I think you are a role model for doing what you did, and also for taking it upon yourself to say, I'm going to do this in my way.
Yeah.
And there is courage and there is bravery in doing that. But what you've also done is you've used your ability to be able to communicate to do it in a really smart, subtle way. So therefore, it's not a thing. And I think that's a great thing to do as well. I wonder if someone is a bit more introverted and they want to come out, if there's another blueprint for that. I don't know.
And I don't know, but if I think about, so if you put sexuality to one side for a minute and just think about someone who's introverted generally, Um, and I'm going into my kind of leadership head now. But what I was saying before about like accepting that the lens that I see the world through is not how everyone else sees the world. Once we start to recognize that everybody is, so I'm going to use the word spectrum now, not to sort of to put introversion on a spectrum, but we're all on a spectrum somewhere, right? And once we realize that everybody sees the world from a different part of that spectrum through their own lens, this is one of the things we're sort of teaching in leadership theory, is that we all have to take responsibility for trying to sort of make everybody feel included. And so it's not just, if I'm in a leadership position, it's not just me saying, this is how I want everything to be, and I want everybody to kind of conform to this blueprint or this particular pattern or this particular program. It's about working out what everybody's individual contribution can be, and working out that it's different for people from A, B, C, D, E, and F. They've all got different approaches. They all see things slightly differently. And so giving people that space and opportunity to be able to explain what works for them, things that work for them, a working pattern that suits them, is a really good way of bringing people out. So I put sexuality to one side for a minute there, because I think it's important that we get good at just being. I think that's when, we talk about diversity and inclusion. This is the inclusion piece. It's about making sure everybody is included, so the quiet ones get an opportunity to say something, or to have their voice heard, which might not be speaking, it might be in written form, for example. And just being aware that we give everybody the chance to contribute. And then you can overlay all sorts of stuff onto that around, like, well, is that about sexuality coming out, or is that about how they excel in the workplace and get promotion, and all those different things.
Interesting. Thank you for that. And also thank you so much for sharing, that part of your journey and that part of your story, because it is inspirational, and I'm sure that part will really help other people wherever they are in their journey. Now, there's another quite inspirational part that you took when, I'm going to say, you're a midlife man around 40s ish,
Yeah.
where people start to think about their life and the rest of their life. And what was the change for you? What were the things going on? You've hit the top of your career, money and status and the riches that all go with it, in your profession. And then what did you decide what happened?
So it was that working out when I had enough. And that was roughly about 40. And that was through a combination of things. That was through a combination of interesting jobs, good job titles, healthy bank balance, nice house, expensive car on the drive. I like cars, I like driving, so I had always aspired. So I just sort of built my way up to having a really expensive car, having all that stuff, and then kind of realizing, once I started to overlay, like, so I always said, like, my job was good for my bank balance, but not very good for my soul. And so once I started to overlay onto all of those material things that I just described, and a lot of that was about status. And so to go back to the point I was making earlier about sort of trying to prove a certain person wrong in my life over a sort of 10-20 year period, to go, look, I can do all this stuff, right? I can have a really good job title, I can have a healthy bank balance, I can have a nice car and a nice house. Realizing, when all of that was enough, but overlaying that with actually the stuff that is important, which is being happy, being kind of comfortable in your skin, feeling secure, having time to do stuff that makes you happy, that gives you joy and satisfaction, and then overlaying the reality of life. So my lovely ex-girlfriend died she was 40 when I was 40. She had a brain tumor. It took her life. I've lost other friends young to terminal diseases. My dad died young. So that whole just sense that life is bloody short, and what am I doing in my channel on this trajectory, trying to earn more money and buy a bigger house and a more expensive car and go on a fancier holiday? I'm actually really happy with what I've got. But I think it was like that fundamental moment of losing a friend of my age, to something as random as cancer, which is like, it picked on her, right? why did it pick on her? She didn't deserve it. It could pick on anybody, and it was her. And she passed away. She had 2 young children. Um, the impact that had on me as a human being was just kind of like, well, that's kind of pretty random, isn't it? What am I going to achieve by carrying on this trajectory in this channel that I'm in? If I keep accumulating a bigger mortgage and a bigger PCP payment on my Mercedes and all of that shit, and I just remember thinking, it's all a load of nonsense, really, isn't it? It's not going to do me any good when I'm on my deathbed, whenever that may be. And so, for me, it was just that real sense of, fuck it, I'm going to step out of my channel. I'm going to step out of my channel and I'm going to get off the hamster wheel. And I think I've got enough and I'm really happy with what I've got. I don't need any more. And I think some of it was status orientated as well, in terms of trying to prove that I was okay, trying to prove that I wasn't broken, and trying to prove that I was as good as everybody else just because I was a gay guy. And I just sort of went, I just don't give a shit about that anymore. And it's fundamental stuff like losing friends and, stuff like that makes you just, that's what did it for me. And so I made a decision to sort of ease off a little bit, I suppose. So I did a career shift at 40 and went into the interim, more kind of troubleshooting side. So I kind of stepped away from having a full-time, long-term job and went and did contracting work. And I enjoyed that for lots of different reasons, but also because I would take a gap between jobs. So when one came to an end and you would go into a job knowing that you were only going to be there for 6, 12, 15, 18 months, that was the plan. When you'd done your thing, you were going to leave. So you went in with one eye on the door to leave again, which was really refreshing. And I was, by being sensible with money and by being aware of what my sort of outgoings were, making sure that I was kind of providing for the moments where I wasn't going to have any money coming in, I was able to sort of maybe work for 12 months and then have 3 months off and then work again, and sort of got into this. It was a really nice sort of pattern, if you like, of working and then not working. And I used to say again, like, so I would go to work. I enjoyed the mental challenge and the stimulation. I love working with teams and I love working with other colleagues and solving problems and doing the intellectual work. But I got the increasing sense that in corporate Britain, I could survive corporate Britain, but it wasn't my happy place. And that when I would go and start a job, I always felt like there was part of me that I used to have to sort of like detach from me and just sort of like put on the shelf. And then in those 3 months where I wasn't going to work, I would put it back in again and like reconnect with myself. And that was the sort of theme that happened for me in my 40s, was I would do that. And I was like, okay, I can go into corporate Britain, I can survive, I can do some good stuff. It'll recharge my bank balance. But the bit I'm really looking forward to is the 3 months off, and I'm going to go on a road trip around Ireland, or I'm going to do something it's just really out of the ordinary that you can't do on 25 days holiday a year, and just do some really good stuff that was good for my soul. And so I did that for sort of 7 or 8 years, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. And then decided I would do a career pivot and put the legal stuff to one side and try something completely different.
Again, another courageous story. Can you talk about there's two types of you here. There's one is your corporate person, and then there's the real version of you.
Yeah.
When you're being the real version of you away from the corporate world, what does that look like, feel like? Who are you when you're that person?
Oh gosh. It's being comfortable in skin. It's feeling totally secure. It's knowing that my kind of just basic needs are being met, and I think that I think working in sort of corporate Britain, I just got this sense that when I went on a payroll, somebody owned me. And the more senior I was, the more I felt that people owned me, and that because they were paying me a decent salary and I was in a senior position and I had responsibilities, that the boundaries between where the work version of Richard began and ended just became really blurred. And I think that's something I hear with people as the more senior they get. It's one of the challenges I think people get in leadership is how to keep those boundaries in a happy, safe place. I think it's difficult, and it depends a lot on the culture of the place where you're working and the nature of the other people who you're working with. And I've seen all shades of good and bad, right? In all of that. But for me, it was that sense of I was expendable, but I was owned, and I was expected to I was expected to behave in a way that made sense to other people, but didn't necessarily make sense to me.
In what way?
I think at its kind of purest sense, I always felt like I started to feel like um, I wasn't really doing any good in the world, but I was out kind of helping rich people become richer, and I didn't find that particularly satisfying. But also this sense of unless you're kind of killing yourself 12 to 18 hours a day, you're not really contributing fully. And I'd never really bought into that. I never bought into that. It's kind of why I left private practice as a lawyer, because I was working in a corporate finance environment in the city of London, and it was a kind of 24/7 kind of environment. And I remember when I went into it, I was young, right? And it was, but I still didn't enjoy it, even as a youngster. When you're getting sort of seduced into these jobs, nobody explains some of the realities of this stuff to you. And then you're there, and it's kind of like, okay, so you need to cancel your plans this weekend because you're going to be working all weekend. Sorry, what? I'm doing what am I? What am I doing? And it's like, if you want to get on, you just suck that up. And I was just, I just don't. That's just not me. That doesn't make me happy. That doesn't make me happy. And so it was that kind of sense that pervaded throughout a lot of my career. I think for me, that made me just feel like I think you can. I think you can show up, be really good at work without having to kind of sacrifice who you are for somebody else's financial benefit.
Do you feel like in the corporate world that's possible to find that balance? Because I find in my corporate role, I'm going to overshare here a little bit, which is that I have to suppress and mute my actual thinking a lot, and I have to say the right corporate thing a lot. And I'll do it because it keeps the peace, but I know that there's things that I don't say um, when I probably should say them, or I don't know. I'm in that turmoil point of like, you know, things should be said, but that it's not really allowed, not expected. Where do you think it's possible to create a balance, to create that balance actually in a corporate world?
I do believe it's out there. I do believe it's possible, but I think it's quite hard to find. I think it is very hard to find. I think it's becoming increasingly hard to find because I do feel like, um, it's just become the norm for people to make, large scale redundancies, um, and so in those environments, when you kind of get attracted to the salary and all that it enables you to have, you one becomes fearful of, if I don't toe the line, I might lose that. And so nobody wants to be a yes man. I've seen lots of yes people, but um, I think it's hard to find those really good corporate environments where they encourage you to sort of speak out and be yourself, because they're ultimately everyone's working towards somebody else's idea of what success looks like. So it is quite hard to be totally true, and I think that's why I'm really enjoying my break from the corporate world and not feeling like anybody else owns me at the moment, and that I need to mold myself to somebody else's version of what it is they want me to be. Yeah,
That's a great answer.
it's a bit profound, isn't it?
Mm.
I hadn't quite thought of it like that, but I definitely just felt this sense of being on a treadmill, being in the channel, we just accumulate. Sorry, we just accumulate more stuff, and then we're fearful of losing it. So here's the fear thing again, right? We have all this stuff and we're fearful of losing it. And it's like, I have to behave like this to keep these people happy so that I can keep my job and that I can pay for all this stuff. And there's just this kind of link. I think we saw a lot of it in COVID. Everybody became fearful of what they were going to lose. And I'm not talking about life and death stuff here, but just the uncertainty that went around what was going on with work and workplaces and things. And I noticed in COVID, the population kind of looked up to the leadership and went, tell us what to do. Tell us what to do. Is it okay to do this? You've given me some instructions over here. I'm interpreting them like this. Is it okay if I do this? Everybody just became really fearful of what they were going to lose. And I just feel like there's this sort of, if we're not careful, there's this like sort of house of cards we can all just kind of build for ourselves, whereby we go, thanks for the pay rise. Right, I'm going to go and buy something with that now, and I'm going to spend more money. But I really need you to keep giving me that money so I can keep paying for this stuff over here. I don't want to lose this stuff because it makes me happy. And that's the thing. This stuff doesn't really make you happy. But we all kind of live in a society where we're encouraged to think that all this stuff makes us happy. And so, how did I approach that? I started to strip out all the stuff. I think once I realised I didn't need a really expensive car and a monthly PCP payment, and it actually didn't really make me happy. And if I wasn't earning any money, it was a hell of an outgoing to have sitting on the drive. And I was like, okay, let's get rid of that. It was a big deal, right? I love my cars. I liked having a nice car. It made me feel good. I enjoyed driving it. But I was like, I don't need that shit. So in my 40s, that's what I started to do. I started to strip all that stuff back.
Was it quite a slow, gradual process?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took very definite decisions and thought processes. So yeah, it sort of evolved over a couple of years. But it was that sense of what is enough, and the less this stuff has a hold on me, the less the employer has a hold on me. And it just made me feel so much freer and gave me that confidence to go and do contract work. When you do contract work, you always go, what do I do when my contract ends? Where's my next one going to come from? And so the less stuff you have that you need to kind of fund from this guy up here, it just made me feel so much freer. I don't have children, so I don't have that kind of long-term responsibility. So in it, I've kind of got that in my favour, as it were, because I don't have to think about the next 20 years of somebody else's life. I've just got to look after me and my partner, essentially. But for me, it was getting rid of a lot of those kind of material things that made me realise that this corporate person had a lot less of a hold over me.
It's almost like you've released your attachment to things. It's probably, if I try and summarize it, getting paid over here, which is paying for these things over here. But in some respects, you've been able to release that attachment to the things that you've been buying, the car, the house, those things. In some ways, do you think that was maybe what happened?
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all part of a bigger shift. So it was that sense of what's enough, and then realizing what was enough, letting go of some of the material things, which then made me realize that, there was just less of a hold over me. And actually, I could change the way I work. So I didn't need to find a job that I was going to do for the next 5, 10, 15 years. I could find a job that would keep me occupied for the next 9 months. And then I'll take some time off, and then I'll find another job. And I was able to do that because it wasn't like, oh shit, what do I do in the month when I haven't got any money coming in? And a really big thing for me was in COVID. So I was out of work in COVID, at the start of COVID 2020, and my partner, his work all dried up, and so we were both sat at home with no income, big mortgage on a lovely house. So we took the mortgage holiday that was offered by the banks at the time. So we didn't have to pay the mortgage for a few months. And I was sitting outside the house one day thinking, oh, I'm not earning any money. This is a bit of a problem. I could do with some income. I wasn't planning to not be working in April 2020, but circumstances have meant that I'm not working now in April 2020. What am I going to do? Maybe I better find a job. And I had this sort of moment where I looked at my house. I was sitting outside in the sunshine, and I looked at my house, and I just went, "My house is earning money. My house is sitting here, and it's just increasing in value. I'm not. I'm just sitting here. And when my mortgage kicks back in a few months' time, I've got to get back into my channel and onto my hamster wheel to get the money from this guy to pay for this stuff over here." And I just had this fundamental shift in that moment, April, May 2020. And I just went, this is just a house. And I loved my house. It was beautiful, and I was really happy with it. And it was a great place to live and a great community. And I don't want to do the house any sort of disservice, but I literally just went, it's bricks and mortar. It's a place to live. It's a roof over our heads. I'm literally just the custodian of it. My house was a couple of 100 years old. I was one of dozens and dozens of people that had ever lived in it and looked after it. And I thought someone will live in it after me, right? I don't need to sit here and sort of polish this gem for the rest of my days. And it just helped me just see things through a different light. So I kind of got rid of the cars on the PCP payments at this point. And then I was like, do I need a mortgage like this? Do I need such a big mortgage? So it was a sort of parting with an asset, if you like. But for me, I think growing up in the 80s, I think as a British person, this great importance is placed on home ownership and what it means, and the nicer the house you've got, the more it says about you, and all these sorts of things. And I just ultimately think it's quite a lot of bollocks. But it's all up here. It's in our national psyche, right? We've got to have all this stuff. And it was in those moments, April, May 2020, and I was just like, what am I doing? I'm going to have to go and do a job that I'm not particularly that excited about doing, so I can keep paying for this. And I was like, maybe something could give here. So I decided to sell my house and try a different career and go and live in another country.
And what an amazing story. What's it like to show up, be your true self every day now?
Oh God, I was going to say it's exhausting. It's not. It's not. It's not at all. What's it like? It feels good. I'm still trying to reconnect. I'm still trying to discover the real me. But I've made some really big, profound changes that have given me the space and the capacity to be able to think about those things. So there's still life challenges. I still have hurdles to get over. Life's not like a honeymoon all the time, and just like a big bowl of chocolates or whatever the phrase is. Um, but I like sort of challenging myself and taking myself out of my comfort zone and trying different things and having adventures and learning and things like that. So one of the things I did a couple of years ago was worked out like what my absolute core values are, and I've been trying to live my life according to my core values. Once I've been able to articulate them, live my life according to my core values, which is around making sure there's plenty of time to have fun, making sure I'm learning stuff, making sure I'm having adventures, making sure I'm going out of my comfort zone, but also an element of sort of Zen calmness that I just didn't find was there when I was sort of working Monday to Friday in the corporate environment. That element of sort of like detaching part of myself and putting it on the shelf. So I'm kind of, that's the bit of me I'm still trying to reconnect with, because I think it's quite hard to find that inner peace and happiness. It's not just there. It's not just there. It's almost like a state of mind. It's something that needs to be worked at. So that's a constant for me. But it's nice. I've basically made the space to be able to give myself a chance of having a go at doing
Are you happier now you've made this transition?
that. I don't think I don't think I've ever been unhappy. I've always been happy with where I've been, And actually, when I think back to 18, 19-year-old me, I wanted to be happy. That was really important to me. And so when I was working in a big corporate law firm in my early 20s, that didn't make me happy. So I changed it. I did something about it. When I was working in another environment and I wasn't happy there, I did something about it and I changed it. So I've managed to sort of maintain a sort of standard of happiness, I think, through my life, and prioritize that and make some shifts. So I'm really, really excited about what the future holds, because I have no idea what the future holds. And when I look back, I've never had a 5-year plan. I never had a plan. I kind of just wanted to be happy, and I've just followed my nose. And it's only now, with the benefit of hindsight, I can look back and go, well, I was in my channel and I was on this sort of trajectory doing legal jobs and I was doing this. It's only with the benefit of hindsight. I didn't know that that's where I was going to be. I never sort of said, when I'm 30, I want to be doing this and I want to be earning that and I want to be living like this and I want to be in a relationship with someone like that. I've never done that. I've just kind of gone with what feels right, gone with what my instinct tells me is good. So am I any happier now? I'm not. I can't say, yeah, loads happier. I'm really excited about what the future holds. I've got a huge amount of uncertainty ahead of me, and that's obviously exciting for me. For other people, that would be terrifying. It doesn't suit everybody, right? I'm not suggesting everybody should like lob a hand grenade into the middle of their life and just blow it up. But I've kind of done that, and I'm really excited about what the next 5 years is going to bring, and I have no idea what it's going to bring, and I'm okay with that.
What a journey.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, it's been amazing talking to you today. I think you should definitely come back and chat to me again when
5 years time.
In 5 years time, when you're wearing a collar on your back. No, but I think you should come back and chat to me about what's the journey been. You know, since you've made this transition, you're further into it, and you know, I love the fact that you have this level of excitement about what's going to happen next in your life, but you're also aware that that can be scary as well, all at the same time.
Yeah.
So it feels like life has become a proper journey, a proper adventure.
And thanks for asking me all these questions, because it's been really interesting to hear myself answer them and just to talk to you like this. I feel therapized. I know that's not the point of here, but it's been really nice to just talk, and it's been very indulgent for me. So thanks for asking me the questions and listening to my answers. It's been a lovely conversation. Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.